Alright guys, so we got quite a bit done. I got the back spring rest done, and it's 3/8 instead of the usual 1/4 inch. I like to use a thicker polycarbonate for the spring rest because I really don't like drilling into the sides of 1/4 inch unless I absolutely have to. This gives you a lot more room to drill, and it's just better. It doesn't really take up too much extra space. So anyway, that's the back spring rest. Still needs to be sanded. Then we got the rear support, 2 of these. I do them a little bit different. Normally people just do 1 of these. I prefer to have the 2 screws for the spring rest, and then I like to have 1 on either side going into the plunger tube, and that just helps with anti-rotation, takes a little bit of stress off the glue joints that are going to be on the plunger tube, and it also helps for the bushing because it'll take up a little bit of the slamming force when the spring hits the bushing. So we got 2 of those nicely sanded, and these are just 1/8 inch polycarb. These are hand machined. You know, bandsaw, file, sandpaper, all that stuff. Just printed out some templates for myself. And then we got the front. Plunger tube is cut. Bushing is not drilled. I'm having kind of a weird issue that I've never had before. Pretty much since the beginning of my Nerf career, I've always used goop. Goop the bushing, always. I don't know if they've changed the formula or what. Or maybe this is a bit too tight. But anyway, after the goop dries, there is all kinds of micro cracks in the polycarbonate. So I don't know what happened there. I'm gonna have to find a new adhesive. The goop is literally cracking the polycarbonate. So this is not glued yet, it's just free. But that's not super important. We're not really worried about that now. That's gonna be the last thing. Right now, we're just prepping the shell for the reinforcement pieces. So what I like to do is tape off the area. I like to have the holes pre-drilled for alignment, tape off the area, sand everything very, very well. And before I do this, you know, you remove the sticker, wash the shell with warm water and soap, let it dry, then sand and clean the area very, very well. I just use 99% isopropyl alcohol. And this is an old school NIC trick. I think I actually picked this up from Nerfomania, and if you guys don't know, he's a real old school legend. I wish he made content still, but unfortunately he does not. But this is a trick that I learned from him. I saw him post on Facebook once, I think. He mentioned that this is his method for gluing polycarbonate to ABS, and I've adopted it ever since, and is by far the best. This is a winning combination. You prep both pieces with purple primer, and then you use the all-purpose PVC cement. This is the clear stuff. I've never used anything else but this, so I can't speak on whether the gray stuff works, but you really want the clear for what we're doing. So anyway, I'm going to continue taping up and prepping this shell, and then we'll catch up in a little while. I still need to do the front as well as the other side. I have the split fire prepared here, so both sides. And this is a really nice fit. I think I got nice tight tolerance shell cuts. There's really no wiggle in here at all. It's a very nice fit. It's actually a little bit too tight, but the screw ports will squeeze it down. There's enough to do that, but other than that, it's a really nice fit. I did make one minor mistake in the bolt pattern here, and I will be fixing that before I release these files. But these holes are too far up, so I ended up having to use my backup one down there. So there's only 2 standoffs opposed to 3. I may add one here if needed, but I really don't think it's super important. But in the version that I release, I'll move these down a little bit so they don't interfere with the shell, because currently they're basically right on the line, and that should have been something that I caught. I actually don't think I could move these far enough down to use standoffs here, so I don't actually know what Slug did. The reason I didn't just use the Slug templates is, number one, when I printed them, they were way out of scale. They just looked small. I sort of measured off the paper, and everything just didn't seem right. This wasn't right. This wasn't right. None of the diameters were right, so I just thought there's some scaling issue here. I don't know where I got these. I don't remember. I'm just going to not use them, and I'm going to make my own. And number 2 is I wanted actual mechanical drawings that I could, you know, have a blueprint and then mill these. I don't really like using templates, like I said. And also another reason I like to draw my own stuff is because then I can print prototypes and then do a test fit without really doing any work. So that's always something nice to do, in my opinion. So anyways, I'm going to finish prepping this shell, and then I'll show you a little part of the gluing process. Not too in depth, but we'll just go over, we'll do maybe one of them together after I finish prepping the shell. And then that'll probably be it for a little while. I don't know how much more I have to do. Definitely need to do the plunger tube, breech assembly, figure out what we're doing with all this stuff. Choose a barrel. I'm really not sure. This is 5/8 inner diameter, so you can pretty much nest whatever you want. I could nest 9/16 brass, 7/16, 1732 brass. We could probably do like an aluminum barrel, although I don't really want to. I'd really like a breech that would breach on the side. I just don't know how much room we're going to have in here. It might end up just getting a ramrod, but we'll see. I'm kind of torn. Like, today's modern darts, you're basically using silly tips like this, silicone tips, as any old school guy would call them. They're just like, you know, AF Pros, worker darts, stuff like that. However, this kind of blaster was really meant to shoot slugs and domes, and since this is such a sort of like antiquated blaster, I'll probably, like, realistically never use it in a war. So I'm thinking of like making the barrels predominantly for my old school slugs, which I use white foam, number 6 slugs for the most part. I also do have pink foam and red foam, but I never really got into making darts for that foam. So we'll see. I guess best case scenario, I'll have like a swappable breech, so I can have a breech for these, a breech for slugs, and then ideally I'd have like the 9/16 nested in here for my slugs, and then a sleeve that goes in the 9/16 of 1732 so I can fire these guys. But we'll see when we get there. Not quite there yet. So I'm gonna get this shell prepped and then I'll check in a little bit. So change of plans. I'm actually just going to do the back ones here, simply because I don't actually know the front location of this. I want to make the plunger tube, have everything in place, and then I'll measure and drill the holes. I don't want to put this in sort of a guessed location and then realize something's not straight or this is in the not correct spot, because this combination of adhesive, ABS, and polycarbonate, with this, I should say this combination of adhesives with polycarbonate and ABS is quite permanent. I wouldn't consider it a solvent weld, like, you know, if you use this on ABS and ABS or PVC and PVC, but it's pretty close. I don't really know the what's happening chemically here, but they're definitely bonded quite well. I wouldn't say it's a weld, but it's definitely on there. And you want to prep these very, very well as possible. Nice rough surface for the glue. And I always keep these really, really tight, or else they sort of like to coagulate here. So you don't want to have too much. You just want to basically get them wet. You don't want to have this dripping everywhere, hence the tape, because this will show up on the shell here. So you have to be careful. And I sanded both sides, so it doesn't really matter what side it goes on. But you don't want to put too much of this stuff because it sort of stains, and I would like to keep the nice polycarbonate look. So I'm going to try and remove a little bit more of this shit. Oh, and it's getting everywhere. It's on my hands, it's on everything. So don't want to go too much over the tape because, like I said, it does stain. You don't want to disturb this stuff or you're going to have a ugly looking blaster. You just want to get what you want to get and then leave it alone. And while it's still wet, maybe I can try to wipe off the sides here. Worst case scenario, I'll give the sides a little bit of a sand. Sorry, I was holding everything so close to my chest because that's what I'm used to. Not used to working under the camera here. And you know, I still haven't decided if I'm going to speed all this up and have a voiceover or not. That might be what I end up doing, just because this is many clips and it is a lot of talking, and I really don't want to have this video too long. This is just sort of a test to see if you guys like this style of video. You like to hear me talk a little bit more and explain things and show what I'm doing a little bit more, see a little bit of the machining process. it'll be a test. If this is received well, I'll do more videos like this, and I'll put a little bit more time into them and actually edit them and whatnot. What kind of sparked this for me was there's no real good database of any of this old school NIC information. I feel like it's all getting lost, and if Nerf Haven goes down, like, it's basically all gone. So I wanted to make a database of basically everything I know, the snaps, the rainbows, the rainbow pistols, old school crossbow mods, homemade internals, different adhesion techniques, just like good information. Like, this is where our hobby started, and personally I wish it never died. But you can't stand in the way of the future. Like, what do you, like, people you can't get like stuck on a VHS or something like that. That's sort of the equivalent. Like, mag feds and short darts and these kind of darts anyway are basically the future of the hobby, and AEGs and air and things like that. So I'm not going to stand in its way, but I also don't want the old techniques and the old mods and the old homemades to get lost, because they were a really big part of my childhood, youth, teen years, and even now. I spent a good portion of my life doing this kind of stuff in my spare time, and I'd like it to be preserved for me and for everybody else. So you want to let this stuff completely dry to the touch. I've always operated in that way, and you can see the shell is nice and prepped here. Now I am going to sand the sides just a little bit more, just to get some of that purple off. And since the shell is purple underneath, it's really not too big a deal. Like, when you put that on, it doesn't look too ugly, because the shell is purple underneath, so it won't be super obvious. But I like to have that nice sanded polycarbonate look. Like, I would prefer that over this. So if I can try and get that color to match again, I will. And then I just rough this up again, because I think I put a little bit too much purple primer. And yeah, we'll just rough this up. You don't have to watch me do this, I'll do this off camera. Alright, that's a little bit better, not really, but it is what it is. I'd rather strength over looks, and I always keep this super tight, because if you don't, it really coagulates, and it's basically ruined at that point. So you want to get most of it off. I don't know if you're supposed to stir it or what. I always did, but who knows. You want to get most of it off, because this little cotton ball here does hold more than you might think. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of a dab over here, and then just a very light coat on the polycarbonate, and that's going to be more than enough. That might actually be a little bit too much, but, and also guys, wear the proper protection. Like, if you're doing this inside or whatnot, you should probably wear gloves. You should probably wear a mask. Don't be like me. Anyway, put that in position here, and then we're going to clamp it and let it dry like this, and I will come back with the results. Alright, so there it is, all clamped in place, and that's just done with some nuts temporarily, and you can see we've got a pretty good glue joint there. There's very little air, and that little air gap there, that might just be due to non-flatness, and hopefully you can tell, but we didn't get too much flash, because it does stain the shell. We had a little bit of run out here, but that might buff off, and we can do the next one now. I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to let that dry for 24 hours. And now we can do this side. And this side I will also glue in the spring rest here. That's where that goes. And that's going to need to be sanded first. And then that can go on in the same fashion. And then that'll probably be it. I'll still have to machine the catch and trigger and then it's basically just shell cutting and gluing. I have been leaving the shell cutting to last because I really am, not nervous is the wrong word, but I've never cut a crossbow shell. It's a fairly expensive shell. I've had this forever, and I had it set aside for actually a guru or some other integration. I was considering doing like a chicken bow, like with a panther, like flying chicken from the southeast, just because I couldn't find a split fire. But anyway, I found one, and this has been set aside for some sort of integration because it's broken already. It came broken from wherever I got it. I might have found this thrifting or whatever, so I don't mind chopping this one up a little bit because the front is broken already, so I don't feel as bad. I do have a mint condition one, or near mint condition one, that I will be doing just your standard homemade internals, you know, your front and rear reinforcements, homemade tube, homemade rod, homemade everything, and I'll be leaving that with the foregrip, and it'll just be like a regular old crossbow. Because I sold my crossbow, I actually don't have a functioning NIC grade crossbow anymore. And then the one that I made for a buddy of mine, Dead Dumpster, obviously that's his, so I don't have that, and I don't really see that gun anymore, or blaster, sorry. This is gonna be I think this is my 4th or 5th crossbow that I'm doing. This one is number 5, so number 5 will be a guru. I had one and I sold it, and then I had another one and I sold it, and then I did one for commission, and then I did one for Aaron. So I think, yeah, this is number 4. It might number 4 or 5. It's probably number 5. I don't exactly remember, but doesn't matter. This will be the guru, and then I'll do one standard one, like I said, just to have them both. That's probably it for now. I'm gonna finish gluing up the shell, and then we will look at integrating this guy. But I'll probably do all that shell cutting pretty much close to the end. We do have to figure out our breech. I'm probably going to do like a slug style breech, just because I really like the look of having this front like breech guide, and then having the barrel. If I just do like a regular CPVC breech, it doesn't really need this. This looks kind of silly, so I'll probably do the slug style breech here. And this just uses like a piece of bored out PVC, and then there's like a finger tab that I seem to have lost. This bolt's too long, but just to show you, that would go something like this. Let's say, and this is way too long, but this will have like a locking tab, and then you'd fire, and you can either do it from here or do it from the front, and then this is just a locking tab. You don't normally use this as a thing because it's really tiny. It's just like a locking thing. But anyway, I'll check back with you in a little while. Alright, I think we're ready to do some shell work. I'm thinking I'm going to do this in 2 sections. I'm going to carve out like from my line all here, and then we'll be able to place in the internals and then lay them flat. And then once they're laying flat, I can line up the half of the split fire shell, and then I'll know how much I need to carve up here. I think that's the safest bet, because you know, this is an expensive shell. I want this to be clean. So anyways, I marked down there, and this blaster is already broken up at the front, so I think I'm just going to continue along that brake line and get all this out of here, and then see how that goes. Alright, got the Dremel out, and I'm going to go way inside the line, because you really only get one shot at stuff like this. So here it goes. I've never cut a crossbow before. I really don't want to, but it's for the greater good. It really helps when you plug these things in. Alright, here we go. Oh boy, that was really hard to do. So they lay in there almost flat. So we're gonna see, we definitely have to cut more out. So I'm just sort of trial and error here, lining that up approximately, and then it looks like we're gonna have to get rid of quite a bit down here, so I'll take all that out, and I just gotta think about this for a sec and then I'll bring it back. Alright, so I did the rest of that just off camera. It took too long, too much trial and error. But this isn't the final shape. We're going to refine this quite a bit when we actually can get the split fire shells on. I just made room for the tank so we can start to secure our plunger pieces, and these just ride against the stock pieces in the shell and keep everything in place. So there's not going to be any adhesives between this and the shell. It's all just going to be sitting in there on the stock ridges, and then it's going to be mechanically fastened in the front and the rear. So anyway, that's it. Sitting in there nice and flat. I do have to trim the plunger tube a little bit. That is sticking out too far over there. I want this to be sort of recessed about like that. Or actually, you know, maybe I'll leave it be. But this front block has to line up with the reinforcements. So we'll get that done and then start gluing. Alright, so I got it pretty well in there. It's a good fit. Everything's nice and straight, lined up. I drilled the holes, it's bolted in. Now it just needs the gluing for the plunger tube to the polycarb supports. And then we can start trimming the shell to fit the split fire shell, but it's coming together. It's looking all right, so pretty happy with that. Didn't get the best adhesion on that corner, but it's sort of too late to do anything about it now. But what are you gonna do? Can't win them all, right? Anyways, how I got these so perfect, like these two locations, is I made myself a little like drilling jig. So just a scrap piece of polycarb tube, and then this little 3D printed thing with holes, through holes, and then this one I ended up milling just out of a piece of polycarb because it's just not, I wasn't getting good results on the 3D printer. Like, you either have a ton of support here or you have support here, and I need both surfaces as a reference surface, so it just really wasn't working. But anyways, that snaps on, and then this little keys into the spring rest, and then there's your drill guide. So I'm gonna keep this for if I ever make another one. It just keeps everything really nicely in line, and then the E-tape is just for the stock ridges there, and just keeps everything really nice and centered. And I did some E-putty in the back just to help with the catch, because there's a lot of force that way when the catch is engaged, and it helps the spring rest, it helps the catching situation. And I'll probably fill this entire section with putty just because there's a lot of flex right here. And I have a whole bunch of epoxy putty. It's probably a couple years old now, and if I keep it too much longer, it's probably not going to be good. I'm going to fill this whole shell with epoxy. Probably putty a lot of the like smaller places, and then probably this whole section here. I think I still have like a liter of potting epoxy that I can just pour into there. But we'll see what happens. I don't know. Yeah, definitely doing some more putty work just to get rid of this flex. And it's you know, it's almost, oh, this blaster is almost 30 years old now, so I'm sure it could use some structural work. So like I said, right now we're really not trying to fit the split fire in. I'm just trying to make room for the internals and the tank and stuff to sit in there flat. And then I can screw that all in like through the supports and stuff, and then we can do our real layout for the shell cuts after. It looks like I didn't really cut all the way through here. Man, this feels crazy butchering a crossbow like this. Oh, I missed that screw port. Hold on a sec. Alright, I just wanted to show you a real quick old school NIC trick to get very good fit with this kind of thing without actually gluing it in. So I have glue already on all this, and to make sure it's all aligned and in the right spot, it's still wet. I like using this stuff. In Canada, this is what it's called. In the States, it's called a go-to glue. Anytime I'm dealing with polycarbonate and it's visible, I use this because it's clear, it bonds quite well, it bonds PETG pretty well too, and it looks not bad. When it's not visible, or it's like polycarbonate to something else, I use solvent weld. But yeah, anyway, so you'll get everything roughly in place by eye, and then you'll take some grease. I use super lube, but it really doesn't matter. And then everywhere where you think glue is going to get and you do not want it to stick to the shell, you just grease up the shell really well. And then this is going to ensure that nothing actually adheres to the shell. And you don't want to have too much, because it might start like seeping into the glue and cause adhesion problems. I've never actually had that happen, but like, you don't want to go nuts. You just want to basically wet the surfaces with your grease anywhere where you think glue might squeeze out, because if you don't do this and then do what I'm about to do and come back, this is going to be like, you'll never get it apart. It'll just be ruined forever, glued together, and you'll never ever finish the job. So anyway, you get that all full of grease, wipe your hand off, do whatever you gotta do, wear gloves, use a Q-tip. Using a Q-tip would probably be the best. And then you would get what you're gonna do, place it in there, put a little bit of pressure on it, put that piece back where you want it to go, put this piece up front, you know, because I want these touching the stock ribs, of course. So just push everything in where you need it to be. Have a quick check. Yep, that looks good. Now we can close the shell and screw it all together and let it cure. Yep, just wanted to show you that old school NIC trick.